Hi guys, Darth Deuce here, back on our action figure review and another DC Multiverse figure, taking a look at the MegaFig Bane figure. I previously reviewed Necron, who I guess are like wave mates, I guess. They're released at the same time. So if you want to see that review, it's my previous video. It'll probably be tagged at the end of this video as well. But yeah, this is a figure I was super excited for. I'm sure many people are. Pretty surprising how fast it came out. They only revealed this figure like a month and a half ago, and it's already starting to ship out. I got mine straight from Mcfarlane Toy Store. I got him with the bundle with Necron. And yeah, very excited to have this guy. Many people have been, myself included, have been waiting for a company to make a much more classic comic accurate Bane figure for so long. I think maybe the last like proper one was maybe when Mattel had the license. I'm not entirely familiar with, I didn't really collect the Mattel DC stuff, so I'm not super familiar. I don't know if it was like DC Classics or whatnot, but it's been a long time. And we have gotten Bane figures before this one, but they've been based on other comic storylines with a bit different designs, based on his appearance from games or whatnot, where the designs are changed a fair amount. This isn't even Mcfarlane Toys' first crack at a DC Multiverse Bane. They did do a Bane Build-A-Figure last year for their Last Night on Earth wave, but that was based on that, Bane's appearance from that, where he was a bit different designed and based on that artwork, so he wasn't quite the Bane I think people were looking for. But I can tell you for sure this one is more than likely the one that you are looking for. So we'll get right into it, take a look at the paint and the sculpt, and this Bane figure just looks absolutely phenomenal. I have pretty much not very many complaints with how he looks. He's basically full classic Nightfall Bane with maybe a little bit of modern detailing going on. Absolutely love the head sculpt. You got that classic mask going on. I love the red eyes, the white, and then that sculpted texture detail you can see to kind of mimic leather, I guess. It's probably what it's made of. I think it's super cool. And then on the back, you've got the apparatus there with the hoses plugged in. You've got like this one metal hose, and then you've got the two green hoses with the venom going through it, which is super cool. And you got the tank on the back. I love the silver paint they used for the tank, and everything has this nice textured detail. Every sculpted surface has this really nice textured detail for the different materials trying to emulate, which is super cool. Then you have this harness here, which I would consider kind of a more modern splash of modernity, if that's even a word, onto Bane here, but I really dig it. Kind of slightly reminds me of Tom Hardy Bane from Dark Knight Rises. So I think that's really cool. He's got the straps. You do got some black paint here. It isn't continued on the back, on the straps here and going on the back, which is a little unfortunate, but doesn't bother me that much, I'll be honest. The skin and paint and sculpted detail of his skin looks really good. They used multiple colors, like a wash on his skin to really bring out the details there, and he's got all these sculpted in veins and whatnot, which is super cool. It would have been kind of cool if they painted the veins, or at least some of the veins, a bit green to maybe show the venom flowing through them, but I'm not too bummed out that they didn't do that. I could do it myself if I really want to, but I think it actually looks fine without it. But yeah, I like it a lot. I like the proportions a lot as well. I think he's proportioned really well, better than some other Bane figures I have, which is really good. So yeah, that looks great. He has his hands here sculpted in these kind of cool open gesturing poses, which is pretty cool. One little detail I think is that on the gloves, I believe these circular spots here, as well as this little square spot here, is actually supposed to be skin tone, but they didn't paint it skin tone because I believe those are veins right there, but they didn't paint the skin tone there. Which is kind of unfortunate. It's not a big deal because you barely really notice it, but it is something worth mentioning that they kind of missed the paint there. He has a little control for his venom there on his wrist, which is cool. You got some nice paint apps for the button, and then you got the little wire here for the venom going into him. And one thing to mention as well is all the wires have a decent amount of slack sculpted to them, so they shouldn't really have any issues with posing. And I mean, still exercise caution, but they are also pretty pliable, so they shouldn't snap or break, which is nice. You got the belt, which is good, pretty simple, but it is painted in this dark silver, looks good, and it has the red in the center, which is pretty cleanly painted, which is nice. And then just kind of continue on to the back, and then his pants, you got standard black pants, you got this pockets, but the sculpted detail of all the seams and stitch work and pockets is all done really well. Looks really nice. I like these little padding they put on the knees. It kind of helps to hide the knee joints a bit, which is cool. And then even the boots have some pretty good sculpted detail here. They look good. The laces are actually painted like a dark gray, so that's really cool. Yeah, there's lots of sculpt and paint detail throughout, which is to be expected of Mcfarlane toys. By far their best trait is making good looking figures for sure. So he looks awesome. You can just see, like, it's just such a good looking figure. Absolutely love how this looks. It's the design I always wanted for a Bane figure and finally have it, so I'm really, really happy with it. In terms of articulation, he is also pretty good. He is much better than Mcfarlane's first attempt at Bane, which is great. But he does have like a dumbbell joint in the neck, so you can look all the way over both sides. I wouldn't twist his head all the way around, but you do have nice pliability with these hoses, so you shouldn't have any issues. He looks up just a little bit, not too much, but he does look down quite a bit, which is good because he's a big figure and he'll be looking down at people, so that's good. You'll also get good pivot, or pretty good pivot anyways. Just single ball hinges or ball joints at the shoulders. They go at a full 90 and then they rotate. I do like how they can move in all the way and just he can be just standing just at rest. I do like that a lot. You can even push them in a little bit further to go inwards towards the body a bit, which is nice. Interestingly, doesn't have the common Mcfarlane kind of butterfly floating joint thingy they usually have going on in the torso. They actually omitted that from this figure, which is kind of interesting, but I think maybe it was for the best just to make that look a bit nicer. I'm not sure. There is no bicep swivel, which is a little unfortunate, but in lieu of that, you do have a rotation at the elbow, as well as a single hinge, which is ratcheted and quite tight. You can get them bent about that far. I think this one may go just a little bit further. Not the best. It's all right, but I do wish the elbows had a bit more range. At least 90 would have been nice. The fact they don't move 90 is a little unfortunate, but not a big deal. The wrists just swivel and hinge. For whatever reason, mine are pretty loose. The hinges on mine are pretty loose. They're the only loose joints on this figure, but the wrist hinges are a bit loose, but the rotations are fine. So it's a bit interesting. But yeah, so that's good. They can only hinge in and out. They're not like most Mcfarlane joints. You can't finagle them to go up and down. For these hands, you wouldn't really want that anyways, I don't think. But yeah, you can't do that. There's a waist joint. It rotates fine. It goes back just a little bit. Pretty much doesn't crunch forward. There's just too much going on for it to do that. And maybe ever so slightly a bit of pivot. So it would have been nice to get a bit more torso articulation. Not a huge deal for me again, but it is a complaint to have and bring notice to. The hips, you can pretty much do a almost full 180 split, which is really good. There is a bit of rotation there. It's not too bad, so that's good. You can kick up pretty far. The rubber around the groin allows for them to go pretty good. Even goes back a bit. Does get a bit gappy if you go back, but it does go back a fair bit. Do have double hinge knees, again, kind of ratcheted and pretty tight, but it does like go so far, really far back nicely. You can kick his own ass, which is really cool. But yeah, she's really tight. And then the hinges at the ankles move up quite a bit, move down quite a bit. They pivot decently. And you also have a toe bend. So you do get quite a bit of articulation going on here. There is definitely some hindrances, don't get me wrong. But I think you can still pose them quite well. And for now, for me anyways, he's been a lot of fun to pose. Now in terms of accessories, this figure, this is in my opinion the biggest flaw of this figure. You pretty much have no accessories. You just get the standard stuff that comes with every figure. You do get the collector card, which I do really like actually. I actually really love this artwork. I think this looks super cool. And you have the little bio on the back. You want to read that, go right ahead. But that's pretty cool. And then you also get your standard display base, which for Bane, you don't really need it because he stands pretty well on his own. But for some more maybe dynamic poses, if you want him to be standing on one leg or whatnot, this kind of comes in handy. But yeah, no other accessories. This figure really needed some interchangeable hands. As you can see, he only has open hands, which are good for different poses and for grabbing on other figures and like breaking the bat poses. But no fists. This guy's a guy who needs to be punching and throwing some punches at Batman or whoever. And yeah, the fact they didn't include some interchangeable hands. If they just include interchangeable fists, I wouldn't complain anymore about accessories. That's all he really needed to come with. But he didn't come with, and I have a unfortunate suspicion that they might do a gold label release of this where it's like maybe he's venomed out with green veins and they give him fists. I don't know. We'll see. But yeah, that's a bit of a bummer, but it still doesn't kill the fun factor of this figure too much. So not a, well, it's a bit of a big deal, but it's not too bad. And then I think lastly, to end it off, we'll just do some size comparisons, just comparisons on different figures. So first up, here he is with a DC Multiverse Batman figure. This is the Arkham Asylum Batman. And as you can see, he definitely towers over him. I will say, personal preference-wise, I think this figure is a little too big. It depends, I think, when it comes to Bane scale, it depends on, I think, how artists and animators draw him and how people's personal preferences are for Bane. For me, I prefer Bane to be taller and bigger than Batman and the average character, but not like Hulk proportions. I like him being bigger, but not too big. Being like bigger than the average person, but still being a realistically sized person. I think maybe like the Injustice 2 Bane's a good example of that, perhaps. Here, I don't mind this at all. I think this is still fine, but I do think he's a bit big. But that's Batman. Here he is with a 6-inch scale Batman. This is the Mezco Supreme Knight Batman. So obviously even bigger. I think this still works though. If you don't mind Bane being pretty big, I think this still works. But yeah, that's how they scale. Here he is with another DC Multiverse MegaFig. This is the one I just reviewed. I will put him on the side. This is Necron, the Wavemate, I guess you could say. Necron is actually significantly taller, so I think that's good. I don't think Bane should be bigger than Necron, that's for sure. And with a couple other Bane figures, here he is with the other DC Multiverse Bane that we have, the Last Night on Earth Build-A-Figure. And this one's actually a little bit shorter, but definitely a lot bulkier. I still like this figure quite a bit. I think this figure is a little too much hate. I think it's still a cool figure. It looks pretty cool. It's just a shame that the articulation's so bad on it. But yeah, that's cool. So you see kind of how they stack up. And then lastly, and this is the comparison that I was most interested in, here he is with the Injustice Storm Collectibles Bane. And they're actually pretty close to the same size. I thought maybe this one would be a bit smaller. They're actually pretty close to the same size. This one's a little wider and a little taller. But yeah, they're pretty close to the same size. And yeah, I don't know. This one I think is coming in at being my favorite Bane out of the two. I just love this look way more than this one. I think the Injustice Bane design is all right. It's not too bad. This one's definitely better posing. It has the interchangeable hands and just poses way better. But this one just still has decent articulation and just looks so much better in my opinion. Proportions are better. It just looks more like how I associate Bane to look than the Injustice one. But that's how they look if you're kind of deciding to which one to get or if you want to keep the Storm Collectible one or whatever. I'm going to keep them both for now, but yeah. And then for fun, because I have it here. This is the Spawn line. What they call us, Deluxe Overt Kill or MegaFig Overt Kill. I don't have him standing, but he's actually bigger than Bane. He's bulkier, and if I had him standing up straight, he'd be taller as well. He's already still kind of taller, so you kind of see how that looks. Funny enough, this one is more solid than this one. This guy's hollow, kind of hollow. This one's not. So that's kind of funny. Anyways, that's all I have to say. This video is already kind of longer than I wanted to be, so we're gonna end her off here. Overall, my final thoughts is I actually really love this figure a lot. I would not be surprised if this makes my top 10 of the year. Bane is like my favorite DC, or not DC, but my favorite Batman villain. I love Bane, love the character, love the design. I think Mcfarlane Toys, there's a few complaints. I have a few complaints, but overall, I think they absolutely nailed this figure, especially look-wise, and it's just an incredible looking piece. And if you're collecting DC Multiverse line, if you collect Batman villains, I think this is a must-have. I think you gotta get this one. Even if you have other Banes, unless you're really satisfied with the Banes you have, I think you gotta get this one. This thing is incredible in my opinion. So yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say. Thank you guys for watching. Let me know what you think down in the comments below, and I'll see you all next one.